only problem, the only sin that Africa ever committed is having all the resources we need and not enough armies to say no. You know? And this has continuously, and I don't want to be biased. This book does not only talk about the injustices that have existed globally, but also our failures internally as a continent. So it is not a biased book to say that we were entirely doomed because of colonialism, slave trade, or any of the other things that we experienced, but we have also failed ourselves.
Every community awards its best, and they don't award because they are just tired of doing whatever they were doing. They award certain things in order to encourage them. For example, they will clap for a child who is doing a good thing as an award. They will give certain rewards to certain employees who are doing well in order to encourage that behavior. They award outstanding people. You watch the Olympics, an award is given to recognize excellence. One of the awards within Africa is the Forbes 30 under 30, which platforms young Africans that are doing fundamental work. The idea is when you award something, you encourage it. Now, the Forbes 30 under 30 awards list for this very year is out, and Uganda has the blessing of having two award people who are awarded, and we are doing an interview with one of them. I don't know. What's your guess? Okay, I'll allow you just a moment. And as you could turn the cameras just straight, we are with Denise Ayebare. Denise, you're most welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You don't look happy. If I was the one who was awarded Forbes 30 under 30, I would be very happy.
You must be joking.
What David it is when you heard the news?
No, actually, it was one of those days. You wake up on a Friday, and then you see an email early in the morning, and it's saying, "Congratulations, you've made it to Forbes, but do not post until this time." So
wait, you got this email like a while ago?
I got it that very day, Friday, but we were not supposed to announce until around 12 p.m. South African time. And you know, I went on with my day. I didn't know it was such a big thing. I went on with my day. I remember that day I was very busy. I had a meeting, then I went and did field work. And then I came back. I actually worked on I was at Chitante Hill for a UNICEF program. After that, I went for an IGAD meeting, Women in Diplomacy. And then when I came back home, I was very exhausted. And then I was like, I think I should post on Sunday. I think it shouldn't make news right now. I don't think it's a big thing. When I'm still there, I see some of my friends sending me all this information on WhatsApp, and they had already posted everywhere.
I saw that it's like a streak everywhere.
It blew out of my own hands. I'm like, I wanted to post this on Sunday. Probably I would have time to maybe engage and respond to people on different platforms. And now I was tired, and people are posting on statuses. And of course, it would be rude not to go through people's statuses.
Absolutely. On such a...
So I say, you know what?
I don't know, maybe also messages.
Exactly. The messages.
Skonks.
So I see, and I'm like, okay, these people have posted, and immediately they post, it blows. I'm like, so I think I need to make like an official communication also about it on other platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, and maybe Instagram minus just WhatsApp. And when I did, the next day I woke up and there were various articles.
Yeah, I saw every Ugandan media.
Yeah. And I asked myself, what is with this? Because I've done some more which I felt maybe they were not equivalent to that, but they didn't make as much news as this one did. And I asked myself, what exactly is it about Forbes?
Forbes is Forbes. Forbes is...
So it was...
We only hear about it when we hear...
Elon Musk has become a trillionaire.
Dangote is
Tyler,
Africa's...
and it was
Tyler
for
Perry.
only famous people. And when I got nominated, when I got nominated, it was such... it wasn't something I was looking forward to. You get, it's one of those things that you do and say, okay, this one is off the list. Now what next? So you don't even get time to enjoy whatever has happened then. You're just looking until the next. So someone nominates me, a friend from Kenya, and I asked them, do you think I can really make it to Forbes? Because it was such an open-end question. And they're like, I think you're doing quite a lot and you would be on the list. So I tell them, please go ahead with the nomination, though I don't think I will be. So there was, of course, a deadline for documents. And during that deadline, there was one document like that, police clearance letter.
I saw the Interpol.
Yes, the Interpol
to
letter.
do security clearance.
Wow. So the deadline was around Feb 28th. But during that time, I think from March until April, I was in The Hague. So I didn't have time for Interpol. So I just let it be. I'm like, oh, okay, this is another thing that I can't get in because of deadlines, and all that. So I come back and these guys tell me, they're very nice. They're like, please don't worry. We have given you more time until the 25th of April. And I ask myself, what exactly is it about that they keep pushing me to submit an Interpol letter or a clearance letter? And immediately after, I didn't meet the deadline of 25th April. I did not, because Interpol and your fingerprints takes around 15 working days. And I didn't know you have to go on a site and actually book a date when your biometrics are taken. And I let it slide.
So even the second deadline passed?
It passed. Then they told me, please, by May 5th, something about May 5th, you should have submitted probably your documents. And this time
round...
I
saw they had a number on the website.
Yes. Yeah. This time round, I decided, you know what, maybe I should. Because I think it has been on my case. I should just clear it off.
Get it out of my way.
Yes. So I went and decided to get the clearance letter. And then I submitted it. And now I didn't have photos to submit. Because I didn't know it was such a big thing. People actually do photo shoots for it.
So it's Forbes.
I didn't know.
People go to...
I am from Rukunji. So I was like, you know what? Anything. So I didn't have photos. They asked me for photos, 5 MBs, and I didn't have photos. Then they said, we shall use any photo that, when they were nominating me, I think they put a photo that I've always used almost everywhere.
Yeah, I know
yours. Yes.
I think, did you use that?
The blue one, the black one.
Yeah, you have like 3 stock ones you tend to use,
So they're like, let's submit that. Then they tell me we're going to use that. And of course, the day for the interview, I was in China, time zones. So I missed the interview. And they tell me, no, it's okay. We can reschedule and see when you can do the interview.
Wow, they're very kind.
Very, very kind. They reached out. Network refused. The network was very funny. And it was like a 15 minutes call only. And it just goes off whether you're finished or not. So they're like, no, let's reschedule. Maybe you would have better network. Wow. So they reschedule again. And then now they call me. They give me a call. Direct call from South Africa. Are you related to any politician in Uganda who is ambassador something? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm seeing videos of you.
Yeah, they had seen.
Yeah, background check. And I'm like, well, I don't know any of that. I don't know. I don't have any information about that. I am just a normal person who has grown up and now making my way out of it. I don't think.
You happen to accidentally share a name.
So I said, that's quite okay. And then that was it. And then I woke up to that email. And until I got to know, when you've made it, you forget about the process. So it was time to reflect back on what it took, to get there, but also the impact over the years that has actually got you there.
And Denise, they do speak quite directly to the work you've done and a better life. for the audience, would you like to tell them what Better Life is and is not about?
Well, I usually like to joke and say that, Better Life is not something I grew up wanting to do. It is not something. I did not wake up one day and say, I want to begin an organization, I did not wake up and say, this is where I want to be. But it was, of course, the circumstances that did exist. Of course, TJ, we have been together and you've been part of this journey for quite a very long time. And you've actually did a very tremendous job on shaping me into the right person,
You're kind.
So,
You're very kind.
Am I? So, Better Life was just seeing potential becoming wasted potential. And I think it is one of those things where you would see families struggle because of the circumstances they are in, but they have the potential. They are very extraordinary women that are trying to survive the hardships. When you look at things like poverty, you look at things like the climate shocks. One grandmother like that plants their beans, and just one day they are all washed away by rain. And then microfinance the next day is knocking on the door and saying, we want our money paid back. And then you find these young people, girls, walking longer distances to access things like water. They're missing out on education. You find that very many young people still, in terms of livelihoods, they have the capacity, but they do not have the means to actually fulfill that capacity and potential. So Better Life was just from those very circumstances, that no matter your background, no matter who you are, you can live a fulfilling life, sustainable and fulfilling life. And it was just to build hope in these communities. And I think over the years, it has just not been about, young people. Because when we began, 2021, we were trying to get a footing, mentorship. We're trying to say, we want young people to become better. Because you remember that time I shared with you and told you, there was a narrative that existed that if I'm a cool kid, I'm supposed to take things like alcohol. That's what makes me cool. If I'm cool, I need to spend the entire week clubbing. I'm not saying clubbing is bad or alcohol should be bad for those who take, but it can't be an everyday thing, you get.
Or the narrative.
Exactly.
Of those that have some privilege.
Yes. Drugs. Drugs becomes part of being cool. So we had redefined what cool meant, from the early days before 2015, cool meant that you're an intellectual, you're an elite, you enter a room and then you're discussing all these issues and someone is going to look at you and they're like, oh, I like that person. Cool guy. And now the cool was, how many times do you go to a club? How many girls, how many boyfriends do you have? By the way, realized
during that time.
Yes. Yeah. During that time, it was such a very big big thing.
Who is hosting the biggest party? Who has gone to the biggest
Exactly.
Bash? I recall.
Oh, yes.
Within that decade,
it was such a wave. It was such a wave that took over, I think, after 2016, 2017.
And drugs and alcohol and promiscuity were the definition of cool youthhood.
So it was more about, the bash. They are called bashes.
They're called bashes.
Bashes.
If you didn't go to a bash,
house parties, 2019, that was the wave. And then we sat down and thought, what if we mentored these kids? Because we had interacted with very many students through debate, through public speech, and said maybe we need to talk and mentor these students and these young people to at least to have a vision, to be bigger than their present, to think about their future, to think that, I can do this if someone else can do it. But over time, I realized that actually there are vulnerable communities and the problems we face in Africa, they're interconnected. Today we have COVID, tomorrow you have Ebola, the next day you have an economic crisis, the next day you have inflation. And then it comes from one thing, poverty. You get. So, for example, if a climate shock now strikes Japan, they have the means, the tsunamis. They will recover just in a second. They have put in place mechanisms that let them recover from different shocks. But whereas in Uganda, the most vulnerable keep being vulnerable, and the people who are not vulnerable are the ones who are not going to be affected. So when you see the hardships of very many women, refugees, PWDs, youth, children, these issues are all interconnected. And I think that's what makes Better Life different. Because just like I was in school, we have all gone through school and we know the problems. But I always asked myself, beyond these problems, why are these individuals still excluded? Why are we not having solutions? And I think that's how we became solution-oriented. We did not want to talk about the problem that many people had always talked about. And when you see our interventions, they are from aid, dependency, to how these individuals can sustain themselves. And I'll give a good example. When we started a project in Yumbe, South Sudan at the border, it was when USAID cuts had just taken control. And these are families. For example, in a family, World Food Forum gives you kilograms of rice, like 5. They give you liters of cooking oil, and that is aid to you. But now they had cut that. So you find you have a family of 8, they're receiving 2 kilograms of rice for a month and maybe 1 liter of cooking oil, or even half cooking liter of oil. So you ask yourself, we have continuously depended on this aid. What next? How can we build African solutions for African problems? How do we ensure that these individuals are able to make their own lives and make them in an African way? And I've already said this, that when you find communities, they already have a skill in something. They already have capacity in something. It is how you can go to urban youth and you find someone is welding and now you want to teach them something else. You want them to hoe-based economy. You want them to get a hoe and dig. There is a reason they're urban.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
If they were not
they
urban,
won't go back to the village.
Exactly.
And I saw a video on your Instagram. You were saying that something you've learned is that communities are they have a rich background. They are not without their own solutions. We need to empower them to groom their solutions, build them, and
absolutely.
And I know you're doing incredible work within the refugee camps in the north, and your interventions are trying to rewrite that story. So, are there any parts of your formative stages that, away from those you've spoken about, that triggered your initiative to serve, that even when you're a student, you chose to say, no, I don't think I'm going to just be a student. I'm going to put my heart out there?
Well, Coach, you see, sometimes I wanted... I don't know how to bring out this, but just for lack of a better word or sentences or statements, is that I wanted to see that people do not have to live on extraordinary luck to make it out of where they were born, circumstances they were born in, yet they have the potential. You get, for example, when you go to Rukunjiri, where I grew up, low income background, and all those things, struggling. You wake up in the morning, you walk to school, you come back. Some days you're just there, you're just seeing. But then we have made this narrative that someone needs to be extraordinarily lucky to make it out of those circumstances. And I didn't want the same to happen for very many young people.
You can name the lucky people in the village.
yes, you can say, that one is lucky. That one, where they come from? No, I think that's the reason as to why they are where they are. So it was beyond the circumstances of where someone is born that we all have a fair chance at life.
Right.
So, and I think that's what shaped me most of the time. I saw where I was coming from, and I saw how much someone had to struggle even when they had potential. And I told you this when we were beginning, that the problem with Uganda, not only Uganda, Africa, is not the lack of potential. It is the wasted potential that we have at this continent. So when you go and you see in a refugee family where they have escaped one crisis just to come and settle and face another crisis, it is very difficult for them to survive. But then these are individuals. They had business skills. They were making samosas. They were trading. They know how to save. They know how to do all these things. But they're not getting the same chance to do them. Why? Because of the circumstances they have found. And I think that was the biggest thing, to go all out there and say we need to harness this. But as we are harnessing it, can we use what we already have? You see, the likes of Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, when we were getting independence, they were the same like us. But what did they do? They did it the Singaporean way. They did it the Vietnamese way. But Our problem is that we import in solutions that do not work for these communities that we are going into.
Without paying attention to those very specific contexts. I see that. So Denise, just to pivot to something else. So I have the understanding that you are balancing school and this. First, welcome from law school.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It must have been very difficult to balance law school and Better Life.
It was not only Better Life also, but I think a lot fell apart during that time. And then I think 4-5 years, something like that. Because what people see, of course, they are the awards, they are the speeches, they are the recognitions, but they do not see the exhaustion behind it, While you're trying to build an organization, build a brand, invest in yourself also, because resources follow trust. Trust doesn't follow resources.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So what you do is you sacrifice sleep, you sacrifice things like comfort. You go to an event, and when you're looking at maybe getting yourself a nice meal, you're looking for transport to maybe go to your next venue to interact with people and know their problems. So I think it was one of those difficult times, and it is still. But one thing that I think that got me through was that at some point I actually stopped believing that you could get the work done. That I had the capacity to actually get the work done. It was more of that self-doubt. But every time you go to the community, and I've had the privilege of actually moving this entire country, every single district in this country, whether it is Kaperebyong, or you go to Nabiratuk, you go to Zombo, you go to Kabare.
Where's Nabiratuk?
Nabiratuk is in Karamoja.
Oh.
Karenga. It's actually at most border almost. You talk about Moyo, Obongi, all those districts, the islands, Kalangala, Buyikwe. And you ask yourself, if I stop, then what happens? You cannot solve all the problems, but you can inspire. And that's why I always say, you cannot kill the revolution even when you kill the revolutionary. It will still always find its way. Someone there will get a spark and pick from where you stopped or where you started.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think you have a sacrificial spirit, because those who prefer the comfort, those who prefer not to take on the trade-off, because there is because I've been there at a point. So people who are on the outside, they tend to think that this is just a ride for you, that you have the moral comfort of not doing so. Did you feel at a point it as a moral duty you owe to this cause, that it's only you who could understand why you were making that sacrifice? Or did you at a point feel you're in an us versus them scenario where it had to be your decision to take on the sacrifice?
You see, TJ, the conviction, it's about what makes you sleep better at night, I always think. And life should be simple, And leadership is quite expensive, and not financially, but it takes a toll personally. It's going to cost you personally, emotionally, and it's going to be very expensive. And when you want to build something that is actually very meaningful, you have to sacrifice. And I always felt, what makes me sleep better at night? You've interacted with these communities. You've seen how women do not give up. No matter what they are going through, they're still going to walk that distance. They're still going to come home. You see how our grandmothers raised us? You're like, these are very strong women. They are going to make you feel like, why should I give up? With all the things they are going through, they have not given up. You're going to see young girls that are trying to a future. They are trying to get a chance at a future. They are sacrificing. They wake up at 4 a.m. They go fetch water. By 8 a.m. they're in school. Then they come. They do not have a meal. They are surviving on one meal a day. They come back in the evening. They go to the garden, and you see that even the young people we have in Uganda, someone is trying to make a living, and then why not help them? You go back home,
especially if you can, if you're in a position
exactly.
to do that. Yeah.
And if you're able to champion a cause that is actually affecting them on a daily, why not do it? You know, it gives me the sanity to know that I am doing this. You know, it's not even about the awards, the recognition. It is about how do you go back and feel about yourself. And, you know, you get that self-fulfillment that I can sleep after I've done it.
I can sleep well.
Exactly. So even when it weighs you down, you know, it's 13 hours to Yumbe, and sometimes when you're going to South Sudan, it is 15 hours.
You're putting your life at risk.
Exactly. But
I've been on long journeys. Some people think these flights are very comfortable. It's long journeys.
It's exciting at the beginning, but 1 year, 2 years into it becomes exhausting, and then every time
if you're into, you know, it burns you down. And maybe something to close down before we move to the next part of the interview is, I read one of the leading voices in town. They had received an award, so I remember them tweeting saying, "We don't do this for the awards, but when they come, it's okay." So I want to speak about the value of the award. What do the awards do to you? I know you got the Moonshot Global Award. You had many awards and counting. What do these awards do to you?
So I think,
is there value to them for you?
So I think when you talk about the awards, it's fulfilling when they come. I can say it's okay when they come, because you know why? Most of these awards previously, they are going to people who are either famous or they are into other fields where they're actually making a difference. But when it is social impact, it hits different. It means that someone is actually recognizing the work. And mostly, I like to identify as an African holding a Ugandan passport. So mostly to young Africans that are actually trying to solve African problems. You know, someone like Moonshot is based in Czech Republic. The founder is Czech. He's from Czech Republic. And it is headquartered in the US. Now imagine someone all the way from there recognizing what you're doing.
In Yumbe.
In Yumbe.
South Sudan.
And for these individuals. And then you wonder, it keeps you going. It gives you the motivation to know that I don't have to stop. What I am doing is meaningful. You know, they're recognizing the work, and you feel appreciated. You know, sometimes actually it is you go to these communities, you come back and you're like, wow, we have done great. But when you hear it from someone else, when someone tells you that you're doing amazing, it means a lot. And I think that's what those awards do. That's what the recognitions do and all that. They act as a compass. They give you the direction to keep going. You know, you want to give up, you remember the reports, you remember the proposal writing, the grants you're applying for and they're never coming through, the rejections, and you're like, maybe it's still worth it. I still need to keep pushing.
Indeed. I'm happy they help, and I totally agree with you. Without them, it would be a bit difficult. Of course, I know some may attract more publicity to the work that needs actual resources, and I think we go a long way in that direction. In the second segment of the podcast, we shall be looking at what is Denise building at BetterLife in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Is it the next Compassion International? Is it the next UN that is redefining African philanthropy? What are we building? That's a question we'll be answering.
Welcome to the Parliament Performance Tracker Platform, a portal designed to empower Ugandan citizens with valuable insights into their parliament's performance and financial landscape. Some of the key highlights of this platform include the Parliament Legislators Report Card. Here, you find comprehensive information on the members of the Ugandan Parliament, from contact details and their biographies to their legislative performance, including bills sponsored, bill participation, term count, and the number of parliamentary committees they sit on. This section provides a transparent view on each legislator's contributions and activities. The Finance Tracker. This consists of two powerful tools, the Budget Tracker and the Debt Tracker. The Budget Tracker displays the current budget allocations of Uganda, allowing you to track how public resources are distributed across various sectors. But that's not all. There is also the Budget Simulator tool, enabling you to actively participate in the budgeting process by simulating your preferred resource allocations. While the Debt Tracker provides insights into Uganda's national debt standing, you will discover key metrics such as the debt per citizen, GDP per capita, and per capita income, along with the sources of these loans. Stay informed about Uganda's financial health and the implications for future generations. Insights. This is a platform where you can gain valuable knowledge about parliament-related topics. Simply enter your queries and our system will fetch relevant articles and also provide AI-generated summaries, offering you a deeper understanding of the issues that matter to you. With its comprehensive tools, staying informed about Uganda's parliament and financial landscape has never been easier. Whether you're curious about your representative's performance, want to understand their budget allocations, or seek insights on parliament-related topics, this platform has you covered. Empower yourself with data and take an active role in shaping Uganda's future. Parliament Watch. Your eye on Parliament.
So we closed the first segment by asking what is Denise building at BetterLife? And Denise, just walk us through what does 60 years from now look like if you're looking into the future of BetterLife?
Well, I think, 60 years. 60 years.
Or the next 1,000 years.
I had, when you ask...
building in posterity?
Yeah, when you ask someone, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, they tell, let me first see myself today. But...
let me first get the lunch of that day.
Yes, but you see, and even before we closed, you had mentioned about, is it the next UN? Is it the next what? But what I look at BetterLife in the next 20, 40, 60 years is one of those African institutions that is actually positioned to shape how development in Africa looks like. That's one thing I believe in. And that's what I'm looking at BetterLife. That the people who are closest to the problem, they are the closest to the solution. So at the end of the day, that even when we want to shape...
What's wrong with development finance right now?
Development finance?
Development work that BetterLife would fix in the next 60 years.
That would fix in the next 60 years. It would just be looking like these communities actually build their own solutions. You're just there to help them co-build these solutions. And that's what I'm looking at. But beyond that, what we are doing is that when you look at climate resilience that we are trying to build, we are looking at sustainable livelihoods. We are looking at technology itself, the soil application. And now we have like a new application, AgriConnect, where we are connecting farmers in agribusinesses. But all these things are just a vehicle to one thing, that all this potential that these people already have, that all their livelihoods, they can be sustainable and in an African way. I need to keep emphasizing that because for far too long, we have had, we have had very good NGOs, we have had very good people in civil society that have come in to support different programs, but they're not the African way. You and I can agree.
We know.
Yes.
In fact, there's someone who was joking saying there is a 50-year poverty eradication donor program in Uganda. Someone was joking about it loosely.
That's quite funny. But it's the truth.
Continuing.
And continuing.
The joke was praying that for more collaboration.
So when you see what has continuously, I didn't want to go into this conversation, but the neocolonialism, it all begins like this, that the systems we have created right from the colonial days are still the same systems that are driving the injustices, that are driving the inequalities between the haves and the have-nots. And we have now put it into, civil society itself also, because of the nature of funding or even the nature of solutions that we are building for these communities. And then that's why I say that even when you look at Soila, innovations, all of them, they don't have to be Western. And innovation is not only Western. Like in my village, Rukunjira, I can come up with plastic bottles taking water to the well, and that's an innovation. But you can never hear of it because it's not Westernized, or it cannot be used in the West. Because now we're trying to build solutions that will work for us here on the African continent. But if they can't be exported outside my community, then it ceases to become an innovation.
Ceases to be an innovation.
Exactly.
An innovation has a Western validation standard.
Exactly. So,
if a woman invests themselves out of poverty, it's not a story.
Yeah, so the issue now is not to build a large organization in size, I can say 60 years from now. It is to build an institution that is actually trusted in terms of policy. And when I say policy, there is a mismatch we have always been getting. We go into boardrooms, air-conditioned, with how it is, bring in the water, bring in the bananas, and then capacity building is suddenly done. And the realities of people on ground are totally different. Who is going to ever bring them in those rooms? So I want to build it to that institution that it is.
Because the amount of money you'd spend at Sheraton, let's say you've spent 15 million on a meeting.
Doing capacity building for people not in the room, like you're gaining capacity.
If you take that money, take it to Yumbe, how many people? Because sometimes I get into those rooms, yes, you have invited about 500 people into a room, you're burning about 150 million. If that money were on the ground, what would it
have done?
And it's a conversation to have, to be frank, on the effectiveness of aid. Of course, I know aid will not stop flowing, even if one day it is flowing from, say, my pocket to an NGO. Because aid will always flow, even if it is from Uganda to the United States at one point in time. I think the bigger question would be on how do you get a bit more value for whoever is providing the aid, even if, let's say, it's development assistance from government to government to through an agency that is very good at delivering impact in the community. I totally agree with you. And from your experience, how urgent is that, especially for a time like now? How urgent is it for us to, as young people who are taking leadership on how development work is done, as we write the new rules of development aid for the next millennium? Why is that very, very important?
I think it's very important. When you look at the African continent and different statistics, you're going to say that at least with all the governments, about 40 to 50% of all our budgets depend on aid. But then besides that, all African countries, besides that, the people who are actually filling in the gaps that government leaves behind, it is aid. There are IGOs, international organizations, of course, including the UN bodies and all that. And you wonder, how shall we ever be able to shape the future of Africa when we are still having the dependency syndrome and we have not graduated from it? It's one thing to say that Uganda itself needs to develop and do all this, but it's another thing to say that the future of Africa is going to be determined by the people who can actually have a say in that future. But we do not, because where the money flows, that's where the decisions are made. AU itself, when we look at it, it is still funded. The bigger budget is by the EU. And when we talk about all these things, and we are our own enemies. And when you bring in this conversation, it's very close to my heart. And then when you see that countries that have tried to redefine themselves, they're the ones that we are condoning on this continent. And then we are having this whole resource curse that is existing on the African continent. What do we lack? We don't lack the young people. We don't lack the potential. We don't lack the resources. We don't lack the talent. And at the end of the day, we have failed to utilize this. Our brilliant minds are going to Silicon. They are being taken to Stanford. They're being taken to Oxford. They're not coming back to the continent. And this is the same. Exactly.
Not paid enough.
And you said this is the same thing I say, that even in Uganda itself, when you look at it right now, the most brilliant people that you know, that you've studied with, that you've done what, they have all gone in civil society. And what is left for the people who make the policies? You get. So I think it is very urgent. And I'm looking at BetterLife being able to position itself and champion those solutions that are people-oriented, that are Africa-oriented, and that are very practical to these individuals in their livelihoods. And that's why I always say local solutions are for the local problems. We can't import in, you can't import in something and say that, we are going to use whatever this is to solve a problem in Yumbe for a refugee, or to solve a problem for someone in Chanamkaka who is not going to school, and we are saying, you know what they need? We think they need more books and more pens. They don't know how to write, but we think they need more books and pens.
And you bring the pens.
Exactly, and you bring them pens. And that's it. So how practical can we be to actually influence whatever decisions are happening in these people's lives? And what I always say is that development is not about helping people. You get. Development is about empowering these individuals to build their own futures. So if we can't look at development in that picture, then we are misguided, really. So if you ask me in 60 years, I want to see BetterLife position itself to that level, to be able to influence policy, but also to bring practical solutions to these individuals and empower them to build their own futures. And like I said, there is a lot of potential, untapped potential. And I was giving an example before we began on this show, that we're getting a lot of honey that we don't even know where to put. Where is it coming from? Who told these individuals how to do beekeeping? They already had it, but all they required were just just something like a starter, beehives, be able to produce as much honey as they can. They already have ways they have been surviving for the past 60 years, this climate crisis. But I can't come and tell them. Really. Exactly.
Every community.
Mulching, but they're never innovations. For us, the innovations we want to talk about are, of course, solar-powered something. But these individuals have been surviving.
But if you really come to think of it, it is the moment someone comes in to help and they don't empower the local solution, they technically break the community structure, because it would mean, let's say you're in Washington. So what works in the Washington community as an idea, even if it's just a free market, some communities probably are a bit more communal, a bit more social. They want to organize differently. They want to place capital in a certain place. They have a certain social value to certain other ideas. So the moment you empower them where they are, you technically recreate their experience. You empower the community to thrive. But also, of course, there is the fundamental debate here, which is on the other ones who are making, the other ones who are paying, right? So I don't know how Africa finds itself. How do we raise our resources here? How do we do so? Do we not have them? Do we? I don't know. It was the president of Ghana at a point who was saying, this aid thing is good, but we must put like a timeline on it and dry the tap, and you can't be in perpetual need for help. For example, for Uganda, at what point in time are they going to stop taking in the aid? Is there like a roadmap?
So you see, when it comes to resources, I am a believer that we have the most resources, whether it is human capital, whether it is in terms of minerals, whether it is in terms of anything. As a continent, we are very rich. And I will make it categorically clear. You see, Tunisia produces some of the best olives on this continent, but they import it. They import these olives, take them to Spain and Italy, olive oil produced in Italy. Kenya here in Naivasha, they produce the best flowers, the roses. You're going to find them in shelves in Amsterdam, and they're going to tell you roses produced where? In Netherlands.
Very unethical.
Exactly. You're going to find
That's very unethical.
Best coffee from the Ethiopian highlands, and now Uganda is leading, right?
Yeah.
You're going to find it out there. And where is it produced? It's produced the other side.
That's very unethical.
We have mastered the art of having the best raw materials and never doing anything with them as a continent. And then you see, there is where you stop blaming colonialism. And I want to be clear that after 60 years of colonialism, we can't keep victimizing ourselves, because there are countries that were colonized just like us and they are doing way. South Korea, look at them now, where they are. And now they're producing Samsung. We are still here struggling to produce even furniture. So you find that the leaders that we have continuously had as a continent have not shaped us into that line. And also when you look at West Africa, they're producing uranium, but can you see the blackouts they're having? 90% goes to France, which doesn't have any resources. Tell me, do you know any resource that comes from France apart from wine and clothes and fashion?
The Eiffel Tower, my dear. And Mbappe.
So all they have is fashion and wine. But for us, they have made their fashion, they have made their wine. But value addition, and I think we have continuously emphasized this also in economic transformation as Uganda. But how are we going to ensure that Shell, which has the more GDP, which its profits when combined is more than the GDP of all the East African countries, that we're going to compete with it, you know? How are we going to make sure that we can actually build our own brands and trust them? You know, if you have Bidiko, why should you use another, cooking oil? Why don't we support? But we can't do all this. You know why? This is all management. When you look at things like corruption, and this is something we say we want to blame colonialism. What is it about stealing money for? Something as trivial as iron sheets in Uganda disappears. Iron sheets. Do you know iron sheets? For vulnerable people. Now what can't we steal? And this is something that is a culture that we do not have any ideological realignment. When you look at the likes of Thomas Sankara, the Kwame Nkrumahs, I think if they get out of their grave right now, they can beat us up, all of us. When you look at that Pan-Africanism that was existing, the Webb Du Bois and the Marcus Garvey, whatever they envisioned for this continent, we have gone away from it. And that's why also BetterLife is there. How do we make everything to be the African way? You get? How do we ensure that people think in African terms? Because Africa does not lack anything. What it lacks is people who think in African terms, who want to act in African terms, and who want to deliver in African terms. But we are continuously taken up by, corruption. The likes of Gamal Abdel Nasser, the likes of, they could have their own flaws. We could say democracy itself has continuously been flawed for us. And that's why I think we need to continuously talk about these things that are affecting us as a continent, and not continuously saying, and I'm sorry, I'm a beneficiary of some of these fellowships, Obama Fellowship. I'm a beneficiary of very many on this continent, and I'm glad I've done them. But one thing that made me realize is that when I go, I will look at democracy in the US ways and want to come and practice democracy in Uganda in the same ways.
Because it's, they normally call them what? Exchange programs.
Culture
exchange programs, yeah.
Oh, TJ.
You being the exchange person who will bring the eggs.
You see, now we forget that if France or if the US or if the Great Britain were to recover from the Great World War the same way we recovered from colonialism, we would be at the same level. But for them, they got the Marshall Aid Plan. France came up with Marshall Aid Plan. It was all aid. For us, what did they give us? The Structured Adjustment Programs, SAPs, IMF, go and borrow money. But for them, they did not have to recover from any of those programs. Theirs was aid. Aid, please recover. Now, all that when it's triggered into our economy, and you look at what the SAPs did, cut your public health funding, your education, which is the engine of the country,
destroy
cut
your local
industries,
systems,
privatization. Exactly. So now you bring them and say that even when we were doomed to that extent, our leaders have further doomed us even further that we can't even now recover. We do not have a footing. We are there. We preach non-aligned movement, but we are just doing the honors of having it. We're just talking about the Sultanos of Indonesia that did it. You're seeing how Indonesia is now. Indonesia itself was importing batteries, yet they have lithium. When they had their, was it the prime minister or the minister who had worked in the World Bank, she said, no, we are not going to export. We are not going to import batteries anymore, and we're not exporting our lithium as raw material. Right now, Indonesia is producing some of the best, batteries there in Asia. They are supplying everyone. Look at the Chinese strategy. The Chinese have continuously been better than us. And you know why? They do not have the divisions we have. They speak one language. Everyone in China speaks Chinese. They relate, and they have their models, which is prioritizing human capital development as compared to profit capitalism. Their model is, as long as this product is not good for the people, you do not put it on market. But for us, is if a few people are benefiting, then we are going to have it. And I think we need to change that narrative. And if you ask me in 60 years, I want it to be African oriented, to show that African solutions are actually possible. Even if you use them, they're going to be the best for you. But mulching never makes it to the news. Our grandparents, when they used to do...
Oh, no, it won't.
And this is the same example I give. Pastoralism, when it dries one side and then they move to the next corridor, who gave them that knowledge? That they know this land has been overused, we need to wait for it to recover, and we go to the next land. But do you know what destroyed that entire pattern? Slave trade, colonialism. They say that, you should settle highlands. Kenyan highlands are the best. Now let's take there these people who overused it and used it, and now we can't produce anything. And this is what we like to make the nexus. When you talk about climate change, when you talk about climate injustices, these are some of the things we ignore. You know what happened in the coasts of some of these countries? Like, for example, when you look at Benin, Ghana, that are on the Atlantic Ocean, they avoided the fertile areas that were near the sea, because if the raiders came, that's where they would start from. So now they went to areas that were not productive at any point. We started planting things like cocoa. We started planting things like cotton that were not good for our soil. Our soil, the nutrients were exhausted. Exactly.
Economy,
So now but when you try to explain that that's how climate injustice is looked at, these are things that are very foreign to someone. They do not look at it
they
as...
may not relate to them. They may not.
So that is the climate resilience we're trying to build.
That's before they bring the climate expert.
Oh, okay.
Who you should be explaining the issue to.
Yes.
That's not an issue, but it's our issue here. Mm-hmm. And I know that in the next coming months, you should be publishing your first book, The African Burden, The Crisis We Do Not Create. You decided to add the word author to your Twitter, to your X bio.
Very soon.
Very soon. What inspired you to write the book? The title is startling, The African Burden.
You see, I always say, and the African burden, I think I need to be categorically clear. It's also about the climate injustices, the climate crisis, right? But then also I need to say, and when you read through it, I think the first quote I put by myself very soon, maybe people will be quoting me, inshallah. You will find...
I'm not allowed to read from that transcript.
you will find that it says that the only sin we made as Africa is having resources and not very many armies to say no.
Repeat that, Denise. Repeat that.
Okay, the only problem, the only sin that Africa ever committed is having all the resources we need and not enough armies to say no. And this has continuously, and I don't want to be biased. This book does not only talk about the injustices that have existed globally, but also our failures internally as a continent. So it is not a biased book to say that we were entirely doomed because of colonialism, slave trade, or any of the other things that we experienced, but we have also failed ourselves. And I give the likes, of course, I've talked about some of these things when I was already submitting, like the injustices that do exist, the SAPs themselves, the structured adjustment programs. But we never make a connection to things like how it affected us in terms of the climate crisis, because this is a process that has been engineered for a very long time, right? Now you're going to have different industries that are coming in, that are mining your resources. What do they leave behind? What they leave behind is, I'll give an example of DR Congo, where you're having kids in mines, right? What you do is not that you only suppress them in terms of dignity, or you only you're only going to affect them in terms of making them like slaves, modern day slaves, right? What you do is that you leave a long-lasting ecological impact that is going to affect that community. You see what happened with Leopold, how they cut down all the trees, the Belgians while in Congo, and the Congo basin was almost gone. You know what they were doing in the likes of Benin and all that to even be engineered into desertification? Is that they were cutting down trees, right? They were creating things like land for their cash crops, for cocoa. Ghana is the leading producer of things like cocoa. They use their cocoa to make Cadbury, but where is Cadbury produced? You get. But all these things come from an ecological lasting impact that these individuals created. And that's the same thing I was trying to say. That even when you look at our map itself, where we say, oh, we are so glad that we have development, they cut down our trees as a source of security. They were saying the rebels, that the people who were fighting for independence, they're hiding in trees. The Mau Mau, what did they do? They cut down the trees. What did they do? They dropped gases. You get. So, and this is some of the things that we do not want to talk about as Africa. We are looking at the climate crisis as something that has just happened to us, as something that is doomed to happen, that you know what, seasons are changing. Global warming, where did this thing start from? We only produce less than 4% of these greenhouse gas emissions. But yet the people that are actually mining here, look at South Africa. While it was mining its coal, they told it to stop, right? But then Germany, that is even hosting the UNFCCC, the climate body of the UN, is still mining coal. You get. And then when we say
hypocrisies.
Exactly. And you see, I'm not putting it as a form of underdevelopment, but I'm trying to say there is a just transition that is needed. Fast in, fast out. You get. If you started developing from things like mining, the first time, like the US, how you're still using oil, why aren't you the first to transition out of that? You get. So, and I try to explain this burden. Now we have carbon credits.
Dear.
I try to put it in there. I'll just put it. But the entire book is to awaken us to understand that the solutions we need for this climate crisis are not only something we are seeing today. Adapt. Do what? It is also something we should call on and say we want justice. You know?
Yeah, because it
the loss and damage.
I've studied a bit about transitional justice. The fact that those who violate, those who, let's say, win the war or are actually supposed to be held account are the ones who all of a sudden take over the transitional justice process. It's, I don't know. The power dynamic is not giving.
The paradox is very evident. Besides that,
it's not giving.
Have we talked about military missions from the wars that happen and US has failed to account for the emissions that come out of the wars that they're having. And I want to unapologetically say that at the end of the day, even when we're having all these very many wars, they're the greatest contributors to climate change. The emissions that are happening, whether it is in Gaza, Ukraine,
the drones they drop.
And then we are ignoring all this, and Africa is the one that is supposed to suffer the consequences of, please purchase electric vehicle cars, please start using gas, please stop producing. Are we the ones that are giving, there are solutions that they are putting on us that are supposed, that we are not questioning. They tell you, the problem is overpopulation. We think the continent is overpopulated.
So now you should reduce the population.
Because now because you're cutting down trees to put up buildings. But who was the first to cut down those trees to create land for their own cash crops? These individuals that were surviving on this land. But
it's a discussion to have. The colonial economy that introduced cash crops and how did it fundamentally disrupt our ecosystem?
Exactly.
Which was working for us.
And besides that, I also make an argument and say, some of our strongest men who had the knowledge of how the systems were surviving were the ones that were taken away from this continent. So what that meant is that there was a knowledge gap that now remained where you do not know how the systems thrive. When you ask your grandmother, they didn't have any weather applications. They didn't have anything to know the soil was bad or what. They just knew that the seasons are changing now. That, you know what, my kids, it is going to rain. They would just read it. But now they took out the strongest of our people and went with that knowledge, because they were the people who were going to the fields. They were the people who were fishing. And now they could not pass on that knowledge to the people who remained on the continent. So what happened is that we remained there, we gave birth, we had populations go, and then others go, and we never understood how exactly they had survived before us, even when we're trying to revive it, you know? And I also make an argument and say that we have failed ourselves as the African continent. Look at Nigeria. It was one of the first African countries to have oil, right? To discover their oil and actually start using it. Look at Mozambique. They have LPG. The gas, right? LNG, the gas. And then now you ask yourself, what has failed us? Our leaders at that time, like for example, in Nigeria, you're going to get the oil. They sold all the barrels. The economy itself, fuel is very expensive. They're ever having load shedding.
They don't look like a country that has oil, by the way. They don't,
I mean,
honestly,
even others that don't have oil on this continent are better than them. Mozambique itself, you know, the corruption that has existed, but beyond the corruption, the ecological, you know, things that we have done to our own people. Have you seen what is happening?
And back to your argument, really, which is that the only thing we had here was that we didn't have enough force to just tell them, take your academic to come on here, because it's insane how global capital enters an economy and just gets money in and out. And Denise, when is this book coming out?
It should be soon, and unless you get me like you know, the New York best-selling authors, the publishers.
We pray that the publisher
yes.
Accepts the manuscript.
But it's ready. It's one of it that reminds us that, you know, this crisis itself needs both an external and internal view.
Conversation.
Yes, conversation to move forward. Because you see, even as we have doomed our own populations, and I talk about, you know, the oil and how we have polluted our own rivers, our own lakes. We have been very careless with it. Like what is happening in Nigeria, in the Niger basin. And now we want to continuously see how do we move forward, yet with an external view, but also an internal view. We need to, you know, go back and reflect. How do
internally there's some reflection
yes.
to do. It can't just be an external conversation.
So that is
Thank
the
you,
African
Denise,
burden.
for taking this interview. It was our privilege as a Policy Digest podcast to host you. Any parting shots?
Well, I think if there were to be any parting shots, first of all, thank you for hosting me, and thank you for having me here and having these discussions at the end of the day, and I hope it inspires someone out there. But then I think if I'm to say one parting shot, I will say that as young people, we think we need to start big. We need capital, we need land, we need a lot of things to actually start. Someone, you tell them 1 million and say, I can't start with that, I need 10 million. So what I want to say out there to any young person watching this show is that you can always begin from where you are. You know, it might not be even $100 or even $10, but it starts with the impact you're willing to take. It is just that conviction that wakes you up in the morning and tells you that you have to do this because you have to do it. And I think that's one thing that I will just leave out there for the public, that you should start with yourself and then the resources will come. You build trust and then the resources follow the trust and not the other way around, like I'd already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. As you could have seen in her interview, Denise had gone to a conference. They gave her per DM. She started with that. And now this is BetterLife. It's going out there to multiply that small impact to reach more people, give people a hope, re-engineer how the world looks at development work. I hope that wherever you are, anywhere, it could be anywhere, you could just start there with the resources you have. And when you do that, we will most definitely create a better life for the next person, the next woman, the next young daughter, the next young son. And that's how we make the world a better place. You know, we're saying better today. So that's how we make the world a better place. Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest podcast, the Center for Policy Analysis podcast that is profiling African ideas and people that are shaping the future of their communities. Subscribe to all our platforms on YouTube and Podbean.